Hu nona I kahala me kale hua. He halele hua no yana kanoi. O ka uno ia e ano I nei. He li anei. Hoi o ka hiki mai. Hiki mai no o ko. Hai puno me ke aloha, aloha e, aloha e, aloha e. Ano ai me ke aloha ia kako, pakahia pauvelina mai. Welcome everybody to this week's episode of Ho'i I Kapiko. Ho'i I Kapiko is a new web series put on by St. Louis School in sponsorship and in partnership with Kanae Okana. Ho'i Kapiko is a web series where we reinforce our notion that we are the ancestors of the future. And we talk stories with a bunch of different guests and we figure out how creating a foundation for us will provide a resource that we can always revert to during these ever changing times. So if you caught us during our very first episode 2 weeks ago, we had a talk story session with Sissy Farm Lake as well as her brother Kikoa Lake. And we talked about Kumujan Lake and the foundation that he set at St. Louis for us to Ho'i Kapiko in going back to our roots. Last week, we got to talk stories with some fine Kioni Mana from St. Louis School. We ka'i kumukiala as well as kapaihi, and they talked about kuleana and the idea of kuleana and how Ho'i Kapiko can help you with your own responsibilities, and not just your responsibilities, but your rights and every facet of the word. This week, we are very, very excited because this week's episode 3, is on Aloha Aina. So, Vilina Maikako, some people are wondering, what does St. Louis have to do with Aloha Aina? And not many people realize that St. Louis School actually has a deep-seated history with Aloha Aina. And these are two news articles that we took from the New Pepakahiko, right? And, this first one on the left, Nakula o Sanalui a me Kamehameha, wa ho'ike ia mai a mako, wa papa ia na haumana o ke kula o Sanalui, a ole e kau i ka lipine ho'ohui aina, ma kola ko umauma. O ke aloha aina ia. Yeah, o ke aloha aina ia. And there is another part, and then it goes on you to talk about Kamehameha schools requiring their haumana to wear the pins. And then on this side, ua ho'ike ia mai mako ke a'one na kumukula o Sanalui I na haumana o ia kula I ke aloha aina, no ka mea. O ka mea I ike ole I ke aloha aina I kona aina hanau, he holoholana ia kanaka. Meaning to say, one who does not understand the place of their own birth is but an animal. And so these are just two examples of articles from Kavaka Hiko talking about how St. Louis, ke kula o Sanalui, would teach and practice Aloha Aina. And now Aloha Aina has become such a broad word with many different derivations. And we have 3 amazing guests with us today. 2 are graduates of St. Louis School, and then Dr. Richard Bordner is a professor at Chaminade University, and he worked alongside Kumu Lake for many years. So we have Dr. Noah Emmett Aluli, class of 62. We have Tai Sanga, who is a class of 99, and we have Dr. Richard Bordner. So aloha mai kako. Let's start with Dr. Noah Emmett Aluli. Aloha Dr. Aluli. Maybe you can start us off with an introduction, your name, where you're from, what you do, and stuff like that. Let's see if we can unmute you.
Aloha mai.
Aloha, Dr. Aluli.
Thank you for the invite. I'm pretty kind of excited. This is a week that Wateke Ko'olawe Ohana has been celebrating 30 years of ending the bombing of Ko'olawe. I'm born, raised Honolulu, grew up in Kailua, educated in the parochial schools, Marino, and then St. Louis, and then on to Marquette, which is a Jesuit institution. Came back and got involved in some master's work in physiology. Of course, this was during the time of the Vietnam War, so we were trying to avoid being drafted. So if you taught school, if you kind of like were in the Peace Corps, these are all interests of mine anyway. In 1969, the University of Hawaii Manoa opened up a their first year of medical school, which was a 3-year medical school. I mean, 2-year medical school. Then you had to go to the mainland. So I got in 1969 and took a year break, and then got into 1973 to the 3rd year and 74 to the 4th year. So I'm part of the very first graduating class of John Abraham School of Medicine. Did a surgical residency at Queens, and then went on to learn from the community rather than the hospitals of Honolulu to Molokai, and have been in private practice for 44 years now. Mahalo.
Mahalo nui. Aloha e Tai. Tai, you want to start us off with a brief introduction of who you are and what you do and stuff like that?
Yes, aloha mai kako o Tai ko inoa no Kalihimayau. I graduated from St. Louis in '99. I went to the University of Hawaii, where I majored in ethnic studies, and from there I got introduced to film, watching documentaries actually in Auntie Davy's class about Koho'olawe, about our people, and it actually just led me into this my career and my passion of film and storytelling. I went to graduate school up in Chapman University after UH. And since then I returned back to Hawaii. I've been making movies for more than 10 years now. A variety of stuff from long form documentaries to shorts, stuff on TV, and also narratives, So I feel like us as storytellers, we're kind of shifting over to more of this narrative form, allowing us to be more creative with our storytelling. But that's kind of a little bit about me. Yeah. Mahalo.
Mahalo nui. And then aloha, Dr. Bordner. How are you doing today?
Fine. Thank you for inviting me. I guess my story is a little more boringly mundane than everyone else's. I went and grew up on the mainland in California. Went to undergraduate at University of Oregon, which then and actually still has a really good Pacific Island Hawaiian program. Never figured out what that's about, but they do. Got my degree in archaeology, came over here, sort of got dropped in the deep end. My first job was working for Francis Ching over on Kauai back in 1975 for a little company called ARCH, which was the first contract archaeology company here in Hawaii. And the first job I had was writing for him, since no one else that worked there wanted to write. And then my second job was translating English into Hawaiian and Hawaiian into English. And since I didn't know what I was doing, I was dropped early in the deep end. So I ended up working on and off as an archaeologist and later in environmental issues. Got a job at Chaminade after finishing my master's at UH, basically because I needed to make rent, and teaching doesn't pay a lot, but it does make rent, yeah. So I've been at Chaminade ever since. Got to know John a lot, and I've been involved in various issues. My doctoral work was on Kanaio, God's country in East Maui, looking at the different ways that people see land and the perception of land, which is what my big interest is.
Well, mahalo nui, everybody, for being here. Mahalo for joining us on this amazing web series. And Dr. Aluli already talked about this or mentioned it, that we are coming off of celebrating the 30th anniversary in stopping the bombing of Pearl Harbor. So what an appropriate bombing of Pearl Harbor. Hello, bombing of Koho'olawe. Wrong one. Not stopping the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Bombing of Koho'olawe. So what a fitting topic for us to be discussing, aloha aina. And so I guess let's throw that first question out to everybody who's joining us here is, what is aloha aina to you? For you and your own conception of aloha aina, what is it? can just let
Oh,
you
I see
guys
you
jump in
flashing me out.
whenever.
So it's a typical St. Louis. They always seat you alphabetically. And so you're always the first guy called upon. And it's always kind of embarrassing. So anyway, Aloha Aina was something that us Molokai folks, especially George Helm, Walter Reed, and myself had told the public, and that's the reason why we occupied Ko'olawe, Aloha Aina. So here on Molokai, the Kupuna was saying, take care of the land will take care of you. I mean, they're so really clear. And that's when we're organizing on a protest march around the west end of Molokai, so that there were Native Hawaiian gathering rights exercised and recognized. So George and I had been doing some research in early 1976, late 75. And it just so happened that his sister had a copy of Emma Navahi's diary, all in Hawaiian. And so we kind of like peeked through it, and then we kind of started paying attention. And come to find out, Joseph Navahi was the very first person in the late 1800s to come up with the term Aloha Aina and use it politically. They had an Aloha Aina press. And they're the ones that took around the Ku'i petitions against annexation and did a wonderful way of organizing that. They should have been able to kind of do it, but the politics in DC like today is just really, really bleak for Hawaiians, for Pacific interests, for the interests that the colonizers and missionaries had in mind. But long story short, Aloha Aina was what we used to kind of like say to the people in the occupations that this is something that is real and serious. It's kind of like returning, because the land has all the mana and cared for by the nature gods in their different forms. You look at Lono at this season coming, Ku, Kani, even look at Kanaloa. They're all symbolize the major forces, the major energies, and then just be able to connect with those elements in our history was very important, so we could see what it was we had to do and how to manage our lands in the future. Luckily, Aloha Aina kept on as a banner for many protests in the years following the occupations, and we can talk about some of that. And now as recent as the Kapu Aina, Kapu Aloha, and Aloha Aina kind of like up in Mauna Kea. So you see there's a whole kind of like 40-year plus history of Aloha Aina being embraced by the generations so that we can accomplish in a Hawaiian way and attitude what's important to kind of like going back to our lands where we get all the energies needed as Hawaiians rather than just from the books.
Mahalo, mahalo. Dr. Borden, I see that your mic is unmuted, so maybe your mana'o and Aloha Aina?
Your last name begins with a B.
Yeah, I know. I figured that one out. So like you, I was always bummed because everyone in class would have last names like Ties, and I'd be like, oh no, and you were never ready, right? So, yeah, I think, since I'm coming from the outside, my original work was with Native American populations, and that's partially a family thing. And Aloha Aina, there's a bunch of different terms and a bunch of different languages for exactly the same concept. And I think what I've grown into, sort of my understanding of it, not only in terms of what it is here, but what it should be here, is that what sort of bothers me sometimes is the translation is with aloha being a very complex word, and Aina being a very simple word. And I think instead, it's sort of, I think Emmett's actually got the right thing if you look behind him. I think Aina is actually the complicated word. In fact, I would say the best translation in English would be place. And that's emotional place, cognitive place, the sense of smell, the sense of touch. And what that also means is people can talk about Aloha Aina and be talking about something that on one hand might be the same location on the landscape, but it can be very, very complicated in terms of what it actually is. And you see this a lot with the discussions that I think you see about what is Aloha Aina, or how do you get people to understand their responsibility to it, and what is that responsibility? I do a fair amount of work with like the ranches in East Maui and such like that. And the folks out in Kanaio, I'd say for every 3 people out there, they all agree on how important the place is to them. And they do that by virtue of the way it smells, the way it touches their sense of it in their head and what it means to them. But they don't deal with it quite the same way. And I think that's actually good. I think that's the richness of the concept. And I think that's what was intended when this concept was first generated over 140 years ago, was that it was a complicated thing. I think maybe that's what they were trying to get it across at a time when a much larger part of the population had a clear idea of the concepts that were attached to Aina. So that'd be sort of my thing. It's a perceptual thing. And I think getting everyone to sort of agree that it is perceptual and it is complicated would possibly, hopefully, help move on the sense of responsibility toward it.
Mahalo. You know, Ty, and I mentioned this earlier that I was gonna kind of change the question up for you. I know that you just came up with this, with this documentary called Hi Hawaii, or you came up with this film Hi Hawaii, and I know that we showed it to our students, to some of your kaikaina at the school last year, but this film it's talking about the loyalist, right? And it's talking about this whole concept of the patriotic Aloha Aina. So for you, what was your idea of Aloha Aina going into this film? And at the end of the film, at the end of producing this film, did it strengthen that initial concept of Aloha Aina, or did it change it in a way?
Well, mahalo for that question. It's so complicated. When I made the movie, I think it's important for me to start there, like why our intentions of creating the film. As I mentioned earlier, I did a lot of documentaries, and we travel around the Pai'aina, and we talk story with everyone. And there's whenever we bring about the monarchy and overthrow, there's a lot of eha, there's a lot of pain still kind of attached to that moment of the overthrow. And for us, what I wanted to do is remind everybody of how many people actually fought for our kingdom, even back then, because there's a misconception that, the queen kind of just gave everything up and everyone kind of just let it go. But we were constantly fighting, as well as what Uncle Emmett brought up with the Ku'i petitions. So the film was a reminder of that. And it's not really a documentary. It's inspired by the events around the overthrow. We kind of jam-packed into this short film so people can digest it and watch it multiple times and feel the emotions and be inspired. For me, coming at it with Aloha Aina, we're the generation that are like, Uncle Emmett guys and Uncle George, they planted the seeds of Aloha Aina, and we're the generations that are kind of living we're the fruits of that. We're more of the Aloha Aina warriors, with a couple Aloha, with what's going on in Mauna Kea. So the film Hi Hawaii was kind of almost a reinforcement of that pride, of that love for our lahui. And I wanted people to understand that, without our Aina, there wouldn't be all of this patriotism, actually. We have to malama the Aina, care for the Aina, properly manage it, make sure there's policies in place for my children's children to take care of. And through that vibrancy, you see this ha'aheo, you see this pride in us, because we've created this, this beautiful land, this beautiful area, which we are all responsible for. So High Hawaii was a really complicated story to tell. For me, when I screened it across the Pae'aina to schools and students, seeing them well up when we show the film, seeing them go through that journey as the character is protecting the high, and that's very symbolic for us. Our flag represented our lahui, our people, and to see our haumana, our younger generations, go through that experience in a movie, to see them well up with tears, to see them very proud at the end when the high is saved, and now that they're holding the high with them, it only strengthened my resolve for what we do as Kanaka, and our protection to this community and this place. Like I said, we are products of Uncle George and Uncle Emmett and Watariti guys, because it's just they've laid a really strong foundation for us to succeed. And yeah, that's just been my experience. Yeah.
Mahalo. Last week, I believe it was Kapaihi made the point in saying that, kuleana is not for today. Kuleana is for tomorrow, right? We don't take and we don't awamo ike kuleana because it's going to have the lasting effect right now, which it does, but really it's that forward thinking. And so the fact that you're talking about the kuahu that Kahua laid forth by, Dr. Aluli, by George Helm, by Uncle Walter Ridima. I think it's amazing that we have Dr. Aluli here with us. And again, going off of the 30th anniversary, celebrating the bombing of Koho'olawe. Dr. Aluli, it's very rare that we get a chance to finally hear, to talk stories with you and hear about, your initial jump into Aloha Aina. You want to talk to us a little bit about your days at St. Louis leading up to you partnering with your hoa, George Helm, and how you guys kind of jumped into this Aloha Aina?
Long story. First of all, I always look back and look at my own kuleana, and that comes from my grandparents, those before me, kupuna before me, and I'm always trying to figure out my kuleana. So the work that I do is because I'm proud to be like the great grandnephew of Emma Navahi. So that's my kuleana, right?
Oh.
My grandfather, who was also attended St. Louis, Noah Webster Aluli, went on to Michigan Law School, went on to Yale, got another degree in law, went to Berkeley, came back and practiced law on Oahu and Maui and Hawaii Island. He was part of this Ahuhui Opu'uhonua, the Pu'unua Society that he and the colleagues of his days went on to kind of form the Honolulu Ad Club, went on to form the Honolulu Hawaii Civic Club, the Honolulu Civic Club, and then they went on to work on the Hawaiian Homes legislation. So, that's all part of the kuleana. I think that's what people today need to do, is look at why are you interested in it, and what is the line that you've got to kind of figure out. And I'm sure it's in what we call our cellular DNA, our ancestral memory. And I think that people will feel more encouraged when they see that. My experiences at St. Louis, I was born at Henry Hall. It was an Army hospital during the war. So I'm proud of that. I am in 1962, that was the end of St. Louis College. The name changed. The name changed to St. Louis High School, and now St. Louis School. we were the last class to graduate at McKinley High School. We had wanted to there was so many things we wanted to change in those years. One was the fact that we didn't want to have to wear long sleeves every day. Once a week, we were able to wear a short sleeve in a different color. We still had to wear a tie, all those things, was just really kind of like we had no Hawaiian programs. The only thing we had was a Hawaiian Glee Club for 1 year. That was the only attraction we had as Hawaiians there, we wanted to have a big party for all the graduates and their families, and that was like causing forest fires, as they accused us. And we didn't want to have to take 4 years of ROTC. We wanted to actually take more math, more science. And so after a big argument, we had to kind of like, we settled for 2 years, and we were able to take calculus and really gear up the academics at that time. And we were the last class with the traditional graduation ring. After that, you could pick your own stone. So, we had to fight for things like that. So in a way, that's how I started figuring out that, hey, you gotta like stand up for what you believe or what your classmates believe. So that was part of the my experience at St. Louis. But the so-called Kuleana of Aloha Aina is just something that I'm really proud to see. We've had some really good results from some of our Kuleana. For example, within the Ohana, they were involved in Honokohua, if you know Honokohua. That's, we called it, I forget what the name was called, Saddle Bridge in Kapalua, where they were digging one by one by one. Before you know, they almost had 900 bodies that they were kind of taking out gently and religiously and packing them and storing them. We said, no, put them right back. And with that Aloha Aina banner, we were learning how, as we did to stop the bombing, how to do the politics. And the politics is, you kind of like, this is what you want, this is why you need it, and this is what you can do if you don't get it. And that was the politics we played those days. And we're able to kind of like come up with legislation to protect the bodies of our ancestors. Malama, what was it? Na'ivi. And then that was kind of like part of the things. We also got involved in protecting Pele, the geothermal development, and the protests in the Waukelio-Puna forest, which were ceded lands. It were lands exchanged by the Campbell and the state for the Kaho'olea lands, which Pele was already and still is actively kind of like displaying herself. We did everything possible politically and legally. And finally, because the mining company couldn't find the heat, and for us, whatever is hot is Pele, whether it's the steam, whether it's the flow, whether it's the clouds that come down to meet this, the heat, that's Pele. And so to be able to kind of like take that energy, that warmth from the earth is like deciphering all her mana. And so they couldn't find her. So we had to find the monies to purchase that land at 26,000 acres, as big as Ko'olawe, from Campbell, and give it to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Like Ko'olawe, it's the first lands and second lands to the recognized Hawaiian governance entity. So that's all the Aloha Aina kind of like mana, strength, direction, politics, legally, and to kind of bring our people together that, hey, we have some successes. And to me, that's part of the Kuleana that Aloha Aina has brought to my life. I've used it in my medical practice and mentoring Hawaiian and other medical students very upfront. The health of the land is the health of our people and the health of our nation. And so that's kind of like my kuleana moving forward with the Aloha Aina banner, the health of the land, health of our people, health of the nation, because we need the land to survive, to live off, to, to practice our religion, and to be able to kind of like come together as a people so that the kuleana that we will have set up for the next generation is that they're managing our own resources as their ancestors were able to do together.
Mahalo. A couple of weeks ago, we had, one of our students got to be a part of this OPIO panel. It was a late night. It was after they had various debates for the different races on Oahu. And one of our students was on that panel. His name is Maui Io Kepo Guerrero. And in one of the questions, I forget exactly what the question was, but his answer sort of blew everybody away, like some of the adults in there. He said, what it comes down to is mutual respect, yeah? If I know how to love my brother, I know how to love your brother. If I know how to love my mother, I know how to love your mother. And so like that notion that you said, health of the land, health of the people, and the health of the nation. If you know how to love the land, you know how to love your brother. If you know how to love your brother and your mother, you know how to love the land. So that mutual love, And I never know that you was born in Henry Hall. You Crusader true and true then, yeah? True and true, born into the Crusaders. Love it. Dr. Border, I know that sometimes we talk stories about some of the different areas on campus, and you being a professor at Chaminade University and having had the opportunity to work with Kumu Lake. I wanted to ask you, what was that like, learning from this man the specifics around our ili of Kalaipohaku, and why is it so important for us to know what get in our own backyard?
Well, I can give you a good example because John and I used to walk parts of campus, and like I mentioned earlier, my background as an archaeologist is based in stuff. So archaeology, you look at what evidence is on the landscape, and from that you try to interpret what was going on in the past. And we were walking around one day around where Kiefer Hall is. You guys all know what that is, yeah? And the brothers were going to put up their new residence down there. And I pointed out that there was, this one spot on the Pahoehoe there had shell, PPP and stuff like that. And obviously someone had lunches there, probably while they were working on the sweet potato patches up campus that we looked at. And we were having the discussion, and I pointed out initially, okay, here's what's actually there. And what John was then saying is, yeah, but why were they sitting there? And we started to look around at what you could see from there. And what the sense was, you had a place for there. And the realization that, and that's why I was mentioning earlier, that's why the idea, to me, a place is so central. Because he saw it from the standpoint of how you fulfilled who you were by being in a place. That to a certain extent, a place can recharge you. Now, we also discussed at least once, and it was sort of creepy, it's very appropriate for Halloween, you could be in places which could take out of you too. And knowing which of those places were the places you should be, and which of the places were the places maybe you shouldn't want to be, was really, really, we used to have a lot of fun discussions about that. So you could just stand there and walk around the campus, and you realize that it was a very, very complex relationship that he had with the area around campus. That it wasn't just based on campus. It didn't stop with the boundaries of of where the rifle range is or where the stream is or something like that. It was a concept of what Palolo was and what Kalaipohaku is. And that's what he was trying to get across. You can never get into someone else's head to really understand what they truly mean. But I got enough into it to understand the complexity of it. And yeah, that's why we started that, well, it's your fault because you started me on that project. But Kaipo started me on the project. We're now looking at basically the stream and Pololo in general, especially in the Malka part there at Pukele. And what we want to try to do is acquire not only what was going on there, but also talk to all the residents now and get a sense of what is Pololo now. What makes it a community? Why do people see them? What they do? To basically take this idea of, as Emmett mentioned, sort of the idea of Kuleana and bring it into the 2020s with the idea that this becomes the basis for future discussions. Because to be honest, I don't trust the government any better than Emmett does. My dissertation research actually was originally triggered by the fact that the geothermal stuff he was protesting against, the plan was to pump that power to Oahu for tourism. And it was going to go right across this section of Maui. They're going to put huge transmission power lines across that part of Maui, and they didn't care. The state didn't care. It was like, why should we worry about it? And that was just offensive. That you could just do something to land. So yeah, so Pololo is sort of an outgrowth of that. It's that the only way that we're going to get people to buy into the importance of place and our places is to get everyone involved. And that's what we're trying to do.
Absolutely. And one great way for people to get involved is, to hear about it. And, nowadays, a lot of people, everybody can be their own storyteller on top of social media. Yeah. Everybody can go on, they can show on their pictures, they can show on their videos. The Aloha Aina Kahea has never been stronger. Now we can just put out a post and, within days, hundreds can flock for a good cause. And Ty, I know that you mentioned, you guys are in your field, right? You consider yourself a storyteller. At your core, you're a storyteller. And storytelling comes in many different forms. You can sometimes, maybe it's a hula, maybe you dance hula. Maybe you are a mele Hawaii, maybe you compose mele Hawaii. Or maybe you write films that depict these things. In your own perspective, how has Aloha Aina helped to reignite this storytelling passion that is already innately Kanaka? It's already in our velo. We are storytellers. But how has this idea of Aloha Aina, do you think, helped to recharge this idea of storytelling?
Yeah, definitely storytelling is a big part of what I do. And it's good that everyone's telling these stories now because it's about visibility, right? The more people are aware of it, the more people know the truths. For us as storytellers, if you do it well, what you're really doing is you're creating a vehicle to help engage with empathy. You're trying to get someone else who has never seen or experienced your Aina, your place, your stories, and allow them to feel, to touch, to hear all of those things. So if you do your storytelling really well, they should be able to gather all of those informations. And hopefully within that, there's Ike for them to get to pull upon, or maybe to help them guide to make decisions from that point on forward. So I actually encourage, with the fact that everyone is, like like you said, in social media, they're taking photos of their places that they've been. They go to different vahipana, the ones that need to, that not all the vahipana, but the ones that we can share and that has Ike, that allows us to kind of go into the lepo and feel that and understand what our ancestors have gone through, and that's where the Aloha Aina comes from too, So to be able to help, like I said earlier, storytellers are just amplifying these voices. The reason why I wanted to be a storyteller is because, like, there's so much richness in our communities, in our cultures that have been disappeared, that have kind of been removed. These stories that have been kind of like erased because the outsider perspectives are telling the stories, our people's stories. So for us, even and we have a kind of hui of filmmakers that we all look to as brothers and sisters, because where the whole goal is for us to continue to tell these complex stories. There's never one story of one place, obviously. So having that vibrancy of area or of a story or a melee or interpretation of Olelo Noeau shows this complexity that we have as Native Hawaiians, and it encourages people to kind of want to learn more. Hopefully that's, if it's done well, you want them to be more curious. You want audience members to want to dive deeper into these narratives. And that's where vibrancy kind of happens after that, and then we've done our job. For me, sometimes, as a storyteller, I try not to give answers. That's not my kuleana. My kuleana is to help release the truth. Actually, my kuleana is almost like to help amplify Uncle Emmett's stories or Dr. Bordner's stories. That's my job. Is to help amplify their voices so that other people hear those stories. And then they can draw upon their answers from that. I kind of, because for me as a storyteller, if I go out there and I tell people this is how you should be feeling and this is what you should be reacting, sometimes they reject that. Even our younger generations, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to be told certain things. You allow them to find that in our stories. If you do it well, if you tell your storytelling really well, you've placed enough hints throughout it where, these people can gather the information and come up with their own answers, and ultimately that's kind of where you've been wanting to push them in the first place. But as an effective storyteller, that's kind of my MO. Maybe because as a student, that's kind of how I was. I never wanted people to tell me what to do. I was always I always wanted to discover things myself. And yeah, I guess it's transferred over for me as a storyteller.
Right on, mahalo. I do have a comment here on our Facebook, and this is for you, Tai. This is from Kalekoi. Tai is such a humble Oiwi leader and a great representative of Kalai Pohaku. He has blessed our school, Kamehameha, in countless ways with his Ike, creative media, and Na'au, Ho'omaikai. And then there was also a comment here for you, Dr. Bordner. This comes from Noelani Okepagora. Maikai kamana'o, Dr. Bordner. Very interesting and comprehensive perspective of Aloha Aina. Mahalo nui ka hapai ana ike ia mana'o e no'o pu ai I nana piha ia mea aloha. I ia mea he aina I ke aloha aina ho'i. Mahalo. I had to grab my phone, bring it up close to me because, my glasses only work so far away.
Yeah. No, thank you.
But,
just as a comment for Ty, I think, as someone who's taught for way too many years, you're exactly right. If you give people stuff, they don't like it. And if they don't want to hear it, they'll ignore it. The COVID discussion on mask is a good case in point. If on the other hand, you tell a story and they remember the story and you put what you want in the story, that sticks with them forever. So the way you do stuff is so much more powerful than what I can do.
Mahalo. Actually, the funny thing is, so at St. Louis, I really wasn't the best student. You had to go to school because we had to go to school. But honestly, the things that I took from St. Louis was, because my kumu was, kumu Crozier and kumu Las Banos, and even in my religion class, all the stories that they told us, crazy. I still remember some of the, the messaging from it, the characters in each story. And that's what I was attracted to, so I kind of my love for storytelling probably started there, and it kind of grew from that. Yeah.
Mahalo. And you guys feel free to jump in and ask each other questions. You can always jump in, share mana'o and ask each other questions. One thing I am kind of interested though, Dr. Aluli, is I'm looking back at the Koho'olawe movement, right? And reintroduction of Aloha Aina and your guys' research in your great grand auntie Emma Navahi's journals. And now looking at this, our Mauna Kea movement and the various other movements we have today, how has Aloha Aina helped to keep the notion strong, and how has our methodologies possibly changed? How has it changed and how has it stayed the same? Do you notice a difference in how Aloha Aina was carried out back then versus how Aloha Aina is carried out now?
Aloha Aina in my days, when involvement was either fungal or bacteria. Aloha Aina involvement now is viral. You know what I mean? Ours was, and that's why we did Ohana, extended family. It was an extended family, and that's how we had to communicate and laid that foundation. Now there's just no ways you can keep up with even the fundraising, with show up at this place. Ours was really directed by Auntie Edith Kanakaoli, Nalani Kanakaoli, Pulani Kanakaoli. Because from the beginning, that was where our name came from, Auntie Edith. Call yourselves Protect Ko'olabi Ohana, the extended family with the cause. When we were kind of like in negotiations or federal courts over our access rights to Ko'olabi, I went to Auntie Edith and said, why do we have to go to Ko'olabi? Because we already cleared ourselves with a ceremony with Uncle Sam Lono from Heiakea and Emma DeFries to kind of like go with, offer a black pig, Ava, bring I back, and ask the people who still roam there permission to enter. There was travel there all the time. And it is George Helm was into the research of Lono Ika Makahiki. He finds that with Rubelet Johnson, his genealogy. So his thing to me was nothing to the island, call Lono, bring the winds to gather the clouds, bring the rain to green the island, to raise the water table. And that Nalani Kanakauli gave us.
Well, I think we lost him maybe.
I know. Best part too. Oh, there you are.
Oh, there him. Aloha.
And as it, I'm sorry, you didn't hear me all the time. I'm sorry, you didn't hear me all this time.
No, we just got you back on. It was just real quick. It was a quick off on.
Oh, okay. So that's it. The Makahiki is a community-based kind of like celebrations, not like just in my days. It was Makahiki with the Boy Scouts. It's calling Lono the land to green our souls, to carry on, and then we also carry called Kanaloa to help us slip the Navy away. And sure enough, he does, and we call Connie, bring his special rain. And we've also called Pele because Kamo Ali'i is the king shark and guardian of Kaho'olawe, where his residence and birthplace was historically. So it's honoring those nature gods and asking them to help us. That's what we have been able to do collectively as an extended family, to be in touch with those nature guardians or ancestors. Mahalo.
Wow, it's funny that you mentioned Makahiki with Boy Scouts. I don't think a lot of people realize I was in Boy Scouts. I was a proud Boy Scout, Eagle Scout. What? And if anybody else is out there as a Boy Scouts, but Boy Scouts in Hawaii started in 1910, which is actually the same year Boy Scouts of America started in the United States, Maka'aina E. So I don't know if a lot of people know this, but Boy Scouts in Hawaii is just as old as Boy Scouts in America. So just a little nugget of fact over there. So Dr. Border, I know you mentioned earlier, how you came to Hawaii and just got thrown into the deep end, about with the Olelo and translating with people. But you found yourself in a niche on Kalaipohaku, hanai by a family, this Mariners family, you became good friends with Kumu Lake and him showing you around. And like you mentioned earlier, much of your research and your archaeological work centered around these Aloha Aina things. How has your introduction to Aloha Aina and your inducting into Aloha Aina helped to solidify your kuleana while teaching in Hawaii and teaching at Chaminade?
Well, I think the biggest way is that, and much as if you ever knew Francis Ching, he actually was the cultural advisor at CAM's schools after his company sort of went under in the early 80s. He was a character. If you met Francis, you knew you met Francis. And in fact, his mom or his auntie or something like that was, I think, Dorothy or something Ching, was like the big Bank of Hawaii person over on Kauai or something like that. Anyway, his family was players. In fact, his dad was the mayor of Kauai way back sometime in the day. So I think the advantage is that, I came from a Western academic background where you learn stuff, especially in archaeology stuffs. And his right from the get-go is, well, if you're going to work with Hawaiians, because everyone in the company was Hawaiian except me, was that, things are going to be different because the Hawaiian part is as important as the stuff part. And I think it was a really great introduction to the idea there's a whole mess of different ways to look at the same thing. I think you and I had that little discussion about the elephant story. Where there's basically in India, this king gets an elephant. And so he doesn't know what to do with it. So he asks all these wise men to study the elephant. They're all blind. And so one has the trunk, one has the ear, one has the tail, one has a leg. And they do these beautiful detailed studies of the elephant, very data. But when you get done with it, you really can't explain what an elephant is from the different parts. It's bigger, the totality is bigger than the parts, which is sort of what I think Emma was getting at a little bit. And that was the advantage of how I got dumped into it was, I actually see myself much more as a geographer, which is what my dissertation research is. And that's because to geographers, place is a lot more important than data. And people's perception of what is more important than some sort of number measure of what is. And I think that's how it's evolved over time. And John was a huge help in that. And I think Palolo is actually a great place, and Kalaipohaku is a great place to do that. Because if you look at those places, in the normal discussion people have, it's like Manoa or Waititi or something like that. And Palolo is sort of like, oh yeah, that's a little sort of sketchy place that has public housing in the back or something. And they don't really see it. And yet if you live there, and I lived there for a while, the people in the place have an entirely different view of who and what they are than the stereotypes outside. And it gives you an insight into the complexity of that. And I think one thing that's gotten me driven the last 10 years or so, partially because of teaching, is that unlike Ty, I don't have the talent for storytelling, but trying to get people to collectively agree on what's of interest or what they think they see about a place, I think is absolutely critical. And on one hand, I love social media. On the other hand, I hate social media because it can be so superficial. Unlike Ty's work, which is permanent, it's there. It's a comprehensive piece. And different people, like the elephant, different people can look at it in different ways. But if someone posts on Instagram or something like that, everyone gets all agitated and all hoo-hoo for a couple of days. And then the new thing comes up, and now it's the new, it's like my cat. The new toy comes in front and off they go. And there's not a lot of carrying power in that sometimes. And that worries me. I think people can get superficially attached to a cause. And all of a sudden next week it's another cause. And I think what we're trying to do with the Palolo thing is getting them grounded in the importance of place so you stay hooked up to something and really make a difference, which takes time.
Mahalo. So I know we have about 6 minutes left altogether, and I really want you guys to be able to have the opportunity to speak to the Opio, right, or the Hanauna'ae, the next generation. What is some advice that you would give this next generation, whether it be, sharing your story, whether it be, clocking them on top of their social media posts or whatever law. What is something that you guys might want to share with the next generation? Advice to them on aloha aina and their kuleana and why it's important to be rooted in something. Oh, we're going to the top of the alphabet. I see them.
So George Helm's instruction to us from the very beginning is do your homework. You're gonna be Hawaiian, do your homework. You're gonna speak for Hawaiians, you do your homework. You're gonna talk anything about Hawaiians or Hawaii, you do your homework. So that's number one. You almost have to be a scholar in your genealogy. You gotta just know where your roots are from. The other thing is connect with the land now. I mean, go find something that comes down the family, whether you lost that kuleana or not, but connect with that land, take care of that land if you can, plant, watch the moons, and get in the ocean.
Mahalo.
Yeah, I would second that. I mean, I think a really key part is that all of us, if you think the one common thread I see in all our stories is that at some point something talked to us. And maybe it gave us a pull in a direction, a shove in our direction. In Emmett's case, hell, he was born into it. He was born in McKinley, or he was born at St. Louis. So, but I mean, at some point you have to listen to what's going to motivate you, and at some point that's going to decide. It might take a long time, but that's going to decide your path. And in doing that, then you do your work and your research, and that builds on that, and that'll keep you going. That's where you get your stamina from to stay on task.
Yeah, for me, my biggest advice is what I've drawn to a lot is, finding your mentors, if there's something that you're very passionate about, it's something that you believe in, you find your mentors in that, and they can help guide you through that process. You're not the first person to do this, or whatever career or passions you're into, there's other people that have come before. But mentors is for me was such a huge thing, because it's like, so you don't have to make the same mistakes again. But also there's that support system there, that guiding, nurturing, almost in many cases, the encouraging, that's always been helpful, especially, when we're doing film or telling stories. It's so hard sometimes because we're in our own little bubble and we don't know if we're telling the right thing or we're doing the right things, so I kind of go to my mentors to make sure that, the process is right. We're going through the right methods as well. So I think mentorship is a huge part about it. Even maybe seeing your mentors and what they've missed, the mistakes that they've made, kind of helps you guide your path and how to move forward. So yeah, mentorship.
Mahalo nui kako. I'm kind of giggling to myself because, I was talking to Dr. Bordner on the phone yesterday, and I was saying, I want this to just be like fireside action, us all sitting around one table with our beverages, everybody just jumping in with their manao. He kind of just chuckled at me and said, yeah, I have no doubt we're eventually going to get into some sort of synchronous pattern on who talks first, who talks second, who talks third. And of course, look, we went straight to our alphabet, yeah. So mahalo nui, gentlemen, for joining us. Mahalo nui for your mana'o on Aloha Aina. And thank you for just being here with us. And mahalo to all of you, e kalehulehu in our kaiaulu. Mahalo for joining us on this third episode of Ho'i Kapiko. Join us next week for episode 4, where we're going to be discussing vai and the multitude of facets in vai. So before I leave, anybody want to just share last thoughts before we sign out? Anybody want to say their mahalos? Final thoughts to share, Dr. Aluli, Dr. Bordner?
I'll go first. Hi. Thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me be part of this. It was great.
Yeah, no, I want to mahalo you folks as well. Mahalo Mukai po, mahalo to Tim for getting this involved. There's a different way to communicate with our Homana and sharing Ike. So thank you for coordinating this and wrangling us together.
So I also want to say mahalo, especially to you, Kaipo, and the support that you've been able to kind of gain for this kind of broadcast. The work that you do, the way you coordinate this whole session is really nice. And to both the panelists, I really learned so much from you guys. My thing is, and I tell my nephews, one who's in the 9th grade now at St. Louis, don't be shy to call upon our Amakua. They will guide you, like they have guided the generations who believe in that they're there for us. No shame, call them. And we, that's the kind of practice that we talk about. And we call this kind of round table. We've been calling it a long time, kapa kau kau. Bring your dish to the table and share it and let those kind of eat the best and, be able to kind of like enjoy and get pleasure or a stomach ache. But anyway, and that really works. It's a nice table. Thank you.
All right, mahalo nui, gentlemen. Mahalo. And mahalo everybody else out there for joining us. Again, join us next week for episode 4 of Ho'ika Piko. E malama pono kako, aloha, yesupu.
Mahalo.